So on July 15th, 1997, the emperor of global fashion just walks up the sun-drenched steps of his Miami mansion.
Gianni Versace.
Right. But waiting for him wasn't some team of highly trained assassins. There wasn't a shadowy conspiracy. It was just a 27-year-old spree killer who was completely unraveling.
And hiding in plain sight for like 2 whole months.
Exactly. And he was able to do that because law enforcement simply wasn't looking hard enough.
Yeah, I mean, when we picture a historical assassination, we want to believe that taking down a giant requires, an equally formidable force. We want a mastermind.
Right. It makes the tragedy feel, proportional.
Exactly. But stripping away the celebrity spectacle of the Versace murder reveals something much more disturbing. This was really the tragic, chaotic climax of a massive systemic failure.
A failure involving a deeply disturbed man who was literally already on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. So welcome to this custom deep dive. Today, our mission is to look at this tragedy for you, but we are absolutely not stopping at the velvet ropes. We're bypassing all those tabloid rumors to explore the really chilling psychological escalation of Andrew Cunanan.
And those baffling, fatal investigative gaps that allowed him to reach those steps in the first place.
Yeah, it's a lot. I was reading through some incredible historical articles for this, including a really brilliant piece called The Emperor of Dreams. Plus, I was parsing a detailed timeline of the FBI manhunt from Time magazine.
Oh, the timeline is crucial for this.
It really is. And I was also digging into some gripping archived Reddit threads from people who actually lived in Miami and San Diego right as this nightmare was unfolding. Okay, let's unpack this.
To really understand the sheer gravity of this crime, I think we have to establish the environment, right? And the stark contrast between these two men.
Yeah, set the scene for us.
Well, in the mid-90s, South Beach was experiencing this massive renaissance. It was this vibrant, completely uninhibited collision of extreme wealth, celebrity culture, and, raw street energy.
A real melting pot.
Exactly. And Gianni Versace thrived there because he was, at his core, completely authentic.
Actually, I found a story in those archived Reddit threads that perfectly strips away the whole emperor of fashion mythology and it just shows us the man living in that environment.
Oh yeah, what was the story?
So there's an account from a guy who was a bartender at the Booking Table Cafe on Ocean Drive back then. He noted that Versace used to walk over from his sprawling mansion, Casa Casuarina, like 2 or 3 times a week.
Just casually.
Yeah. He wouldn't roll up with some massive entourage. He'd just sit at the bar, get a free bottled water, and chat with the staff. He treated them like absolute peers.
Which completely shatters the assumption that a billionaire fashion mogul would, isolate himself behind unapproachable walls.
Yeah.
He was entirely comfortable in his own skin. Yeah.
Right, and the story actually goes further. One day, Versace invites the same bartender to the opening of a new boutique nearby. The bartender goes, and he's looking around completely sticker shocked. I mean, $1,500 for a shirt, $2,500 for pants.
Yeah, 90s high fashion prices.
Exactly. So Versace notices him admiring this gorgeous, thick, black leather belt with his iconic, silver-trimmed Medusa head on it. Versace insists the bartender try it on, asks the staff how it looks, and then just says, "I want you to have it." An $1,800 belt. The bartender said turning it down wasn't even an option without being rude. He wore it for years and eventually gave it to a cousin as a thank you for free rent.
That anecdote really anchors us to the reality of who was lost. A man who, despite his immense wealth, forged genuine connections.
Yeah, a real person.
But now look at Andrew Cunanan. His entire existence was the polar opposite. He was a 27-year-old social climber whose life was an entirely fabricated facade.
It's just so dark.
Even his own estranged mother described him in police interviews as a high-class male prostitute.
I mean, that is such a brutal, revealing description from a parent.
It really speaks to the illusion he was trying to maintain. He lived in this pathetic fantasy world of his own invention. He would claim to be the heir to a vast plantation fortune or an importer. He was always playing a role.
Right.
He survived by relying on older, wealthy men in the San Diego area to fund this sophisticated party boy image. And when those men stopped paying, well, when he started losing his looks or his novelty, he turned to selling drugs.
Just desperate to keep up appearances.
Exactly.
See, this is where I really have to push back hard against the way media often portrays this tragedy. They love to frame it as some sort of epic clash of titans.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is a complete myth. Think about it this way. Cunanan wasn't a criminal mastermind. His personality was basically a psychological Ponzi scheme.
A Ponzi scheme. That's a great way to put it.
Right. Because he relied on a constant, fresh influx of wealth and validation from older men to keep the illusion alive. And just like a Ponzi scheme, the moment the capital dried up, the entire structure violently collapsed.
Yeah.
Versace built an empire by elevating his true self. Cunanan was constructed entirely of hollow, borrowed identities. When that Ponzi scheme of a life went bankrupt, the violence began.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that psychological bankruptcy is the direct mechanism for the cross-country spree. The violence wasn't strategic at all. It was the physical manifestation of his desperation.
Yeah, as his social currency evaporated, his actions just became increasingly frantic. Let's actually trace that physical manifestation, because looking at the timeline of the manhunt from time, the rapid deterioration is terrifying. This wasn't a single moment where someone just snaps. It was a 3-month escalating descent.
It really was. The timeline exposes exactly how his mental state fractured. It starts in late April 1997 in Minneapolis. Cunanan murders a man he knew, Jeffrey Trail, a 28-year-old former naval officer. And the method is incredibly telling. He beats him to death with a hammer.
Wait, why a hammer? I mean, that is so incredibly intimate and brutal. It requires physical exertion and, close proximity.
Because at this stage, the violence is still deeply personal. It's an explosion of rage. Trail was a friend, someone Cunanan felt had betrayed him or abandoned him as his social standing was crumbling.
Okay, that makes sense.
But just days later, on May 3rd, still in Minnesota, the methodology shifts completely. He shoots and kills his former lover, David Manson, and dumps his body near a lake.
So we go from a blunt force crime of passion to using a firearm.
Right, and it accelerates. The very next day, May 4th, he's in Chicago. He attacks Lee Miglin, a 72-year-old real estate developer he seemingly had no prior meaningful connection to. Miglin is stabbed repeatedly, and Cunanan steals his Lexus.
Stabbing now. And then, less than a week later, on May 9th in New Jersey, the method changes yet again. He shoots William Reese, a 45-year-old cemetery worker.
The motive for William Reese is honestly the most chilling part of the escalation. By victim number 4, any personal grievance or perceived betrayal had completely vanished.
He killed an innocent man who was literally just doing his job at a cemetery purely to steal his red pickup truck.
Exactly.
See, this shifting, chaotic methodology is exactly why the calculating mastermind theory falls apart. Look at the sequence. A hammer, then a gun, then a knife, then a gun again.
Right.
A professional assassin has a signature, a preferred tool. This is a guy scrambling. It's the behavior of a cornered animal. He's striking out wildly. His actions devolve from personal, rage-filled murders to pure, cold, transactional survival logistics. He just needed a vehicle to keep running.
Yeah. The deeply personal murders required him to flee, which necessitated the transactional murders. And that stolen red pickup truck from New Jersey becomes the critical link to the next phase of this tragedy. It brings us face to face with the staggering investigative failures that allowed him to reach Miami.
This is the most baffling part of the entire deep dive for me. How does a man who is actively leaving a cross-country trail of bodies and stolen vehicles, who is officially placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, make it to Miami Beach and live completely undetected for 2 months?
It sounds impossible today.
Right. We are talking about one of the most heavily policed, high-profile tourist destinations in the country.
But you're thinking about this through the lens of modern interconnected law enforcement.
Yeah.
Today, an automated license plate reader would flag a stolen truck from New Jersey the second it crossed a county line.
Right. Algorithms do the work now.
But in 1997, law enforcement was crippled by jurisdictional silos. The FBI had him on a list, sure, but the local Miami Beach parking attendant checking a garage isn't cross-referencing federal databases. They just see a truck with a paid parking stub.
So it's a combination of technological limitations and a massive normalcy bias. He arrives in Miami Beach in that stolen red truck on May 12th. He checks into an inexpensive place called the Normandy Hotel, and he's just hanging out. He's going to clubs, he's buying food.
Living normal life.
The sources even detail an almost catch. Cunanan was spotted at a local sandwich shop days before the Versace murder. A civilian recognized him from the news and called it in, but the police arrived just minutes too late.
We also have the places within the cultural atmosphere of 1990 South Beach, and specifically the terror rippling through the LGBTQ+ community at the time.
Yeah, those archived Reddit threads provide a vital, really chilling perspective on that.
They do. One user recounted a story from their roommate, a bartender at a gay bar in San Diego, who actually knew Cunanan before the murders began. The roommate specifically noted, "I never liked the guy, he just had dead eyes, something seemed really off about him."
Imagine knowing the guy with the dead eyes at your local bar is now on a cross-country killing spree and targeting people in your community.
The terror was absolute. But what compounded that terror was the sheer anger directed at law enforcement by gay and lesbian advocates.
Because they felt ignored.
Right. They argued, with significant evidence, that authorities were operating with a sluggish, dismissive attitude. Average, ordinary gay men were being brutally murdered, and the police response felt incredibly lax.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting and deeply infuriating. That stolen red pickup truck. A vehicle definitively linked to a murder in New Jersey. A vehicle that actually contained a pawn shop ticket with Cunanan's alias on it was parked in a Miami municipal garage.
Yeah.
And it just sat there unnoticed by authorities for weeks, while one of the most wanted men in America casually strolled down Ocean Drive.
This raises an important question about the systemic biases in how manhunts are prioritized and investigated.
Absolutely.
If the victims don't fit a certain profile of societal value or wealth, do the mechanisms of justice operate with the same urgency? The LGBTQ+ community felt the evidence suggested they did not.
They felt the full weight and resources of the law only mobilized when a global billionaire celebrity was in the crosshairs.
Exactly. The delay in connecting those local dots to the federal manhunt allowed a killer to walk right up to Casa Casuarina.
Which brings us to the morning of July 15, 1997. The catastrophic intersection of Cunanan's psychological desperation and those massive investigative blind spots. Gianni Versace was 50 years old. He was at the absolute pinnacle of his industry.
His brand was preparing for an initial public offering that was expected to value the company at over $1 billion.
And his routine that particular morning was an anomaly. Usually he had an assistant fetch the morning papers.
Right.
But for whatever reason, on this beautiful, sunny Miami morning, he decides to go himself. At 8:30 a.m., he walks from his mansion down Ocean Drive to the news cafe. It's just a few short blocks, a walk he's done 100 times.
He buys a few magazines, Vogue and the New Yorker, and a pastry.
Just incredibly mundane details of a man feeling entirely safe in his own neighborhood. At 8:45 a.m., he returns to his mansion, he walks up the marble steps, he puts his key into the iron gate, and from behind, Andrew Cunanan approaches.
Wearing a gray t-shirt, shorts, and a backpack.
He raises a .40 caliber Taurus pistol, the exact same weapon used to kill his previous victims, and fires 2 point-blank shots into the back of Versace's head. By 9:21 a.m. at Jackson Memorial Hospital, the fashion icon was pronounced dead.
The immediate aftermath was just pure chaos. The sluggish manhunt that the community had criticized suddenly transformed into an overwhelming militarized occupation.
Miami Beach was essentially paralyzed for 8 tense days. Helicopters, SWAT teams, house-to-house searches. The entire island was on lockdown. Nobody could leave without having their trunk searched.
It finally concluded on July 23rd. A caretaker checking on a multi-level houseboat located just 40 blocks from Versace's mansion reported hearing a gunshot.
40 blocks! He was that close the whole time.
Yep. Police surrounded the boat, deploying tear gas and eventually breaching the doors. Inside, they found Andrew Cunanan dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He had used the exact same .40 caliber Taurus pistol.
We need to pause here and be incredibly clear, because true crime history is constantly polluted by sensationalism and tabloid garbage.
Oh, for sure.
We really have to dismantle the rumors that exploded in the wake of the houseboat discovery. First, there was no grand manifesto. There was no suicide note explaining his actions.
No. And second, there was a rampant homophobic theory circulated by the media that Cunanan had contracted HIV and was enacting some sort of dark, targeted revenge spree on the gay community.
Right, you hear that one all the time.
But that was definitively proven false by his autopsy. He was HIV negative.
Beyond that, there's the pervasive myth that Versace and Cunanan had met years prior in a VIP section of a San Francisco nightclub, suggesting Cunanan was stalking him specifically over a perceived slight or a rejected advance.
Global fiction.
The Versace family categorically denies they ever met. Law enforcement found absolutely no evidence of a prior relationship. Ultimately, the true motive for why he targeted Versace that morning went to the grave with Cunanan.
What didn't go to the grave was the grotesque cultural frenzy that followed. The media coverage treated his death as if a head of state had been assassinated, but the public reaction was incredibly morbid.
Morbid is an understatement. You had tourists and onlookers dipping Versace magazine advertisements into his actual blood on the steps of the mansion, treating them as twisted souvenirs.
This is sick.
You had shoppers instantly flooding boutiques, buying up any merchandise with his Medusa head logo, completely selling out stores. It's fascinating, in a dark way. It's as if society, when faced with a profoundly senseless act of violence, tries to literally purchase a piece of the tragedy to make sense of it. They couldn't understand the chaotic failure of the system, so they bought a piece of the luxury brand instead.
It highlights our deep, vicarious attachment to those who seemingly live fulfilled, authentic lives, while simultaneously exposing our vulnerability to the dark, unglamorous reality of a killer who slipped through the cracks.
So to summarize this deep dive, we've seen that the events of July 1997 were about so much more than the tragic loss of a brilliant designer. It was the devastating intersection of a generous man's morning routine and a desperate spree killer who exploited the jurisdictional silos and systemic biases of a flawed investigative system.
What's fascinating here is how much this history demands our attention today. It forces us to critically examine the mechanisms of fame, the technological and communicative blind spots in law enforcement, and the extreme danger of ignoring the early warning signs of a crumbling psyche.
Yeah, Cunanan's Ponzi scheme of a life collapsed, and because the system wasn't looking closely enough, innocent people paid the price. So, what does this all mean? We started by talking about the illusion of a Hollywood assassination. We wanted a criminal mastermind to explain the death of a titan. But the truth was, a broken man with a stolen gun, hiding in a cheap hotel, parking a stolen truck in a public garage because nobody was connecting the dots.
Yeah.
Which leaves me with one final thought for you to mull over. Considering how law enforcement and the media only mobilized their full, overwhelming power after a famous, wealthy figure was killed, how much of our modern obsession with true crime is actually driven by a desire for justice, and how much of it is simply dictated by the social status and the wealth of the victims involved?